Hi, welcome back to my channel. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so today I want to go through some of my favorites and give you recommendations. The first one is just a specific audiobook narrator I love, Julia Whelan. You might have heard her because she's done all of Emily Henry's romance books, and I've listened to every single one of those books in audiobook format, and she just kills it every time. She's just the perfect audiobook narrator. She has like a lot of emotion in her voice, which I think really helps you connect to a character. And like, she's not annoying. That sounds so mean, but sometimes when you listen to romance audiobook narrators, they can be kind of like whiny and just like annoying, and she's not like that. And also her male voices aren't cringy. Another thing that's very important for a romance audiobook narrator. I can't when the male voices, like a female audiobook narrator does cringe male voices. I can't do it. She also has her own book called Thank You for Listening that is a romance between two audiobook narrators that she also narrates. She obviously kills it like she always does, but it's also fun to read about audiobook narrators when you listen to so many audiobooks. But it's also just a good romance, period. Like, even if you don't want to listen to it, I would definitely recommend it. Sorry, I keep looking down because I have it in my notes, but I need to like not do that. If We Were Villains. A trend in this video is that these are also just like my favorite books, so I'm probably biased, but If We Were Villains is a mystery thriller that follows 6 students at this prestigious conservatory for drama, but they only perform Shakespeare. So listening to the audiobook is really nice because you get to hear the Shakespeare out loud, like how it's meant to be heard, and it just makes it so much more immersive that way. Like, again, just a fantastic book. I've read it and listened to it, so either way it's an amazing book. But if you really want to hear the Shakespeare and can like appreciate that, I definitely recommend the audiobook. Next is sort of like a genre of audiobook, and that is memoirs that are voiced by the author. I have 2 specifically. The first is Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, who is the lead singer of Japanese Breakfast. She has a memoir about growing up like half Korean and her relationship with her mother, who sadly develops cancer and passes away, and just like that complicated relationship. And she did such a good job narrating this. I remember I was listening to it at work and like choking back sobs because the story is so good, but just hearing her and like hearing the emotion in her voice and hearing her get choked up when she's reading was so powerful. And also because it's a lot about her Korean heritage, I really appreciated getting to hear the correct Korean pronunciations for things, because to be honest, like, I have no idea what that's supposed to sound like when I'm reading it on a page, so I really liked that I could hear how everything was supposed to be said. And the next one is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This book has been everywhere for the past like year, rightfully so, but I really recommend the audiobook if you're gonna pick it up. Again, she narrates it and she does a great job. It's about her growing up a child star and her abusive mother. And what she does that is so different that I've never heard before is when she's reading stories about when she was younger, she sort of makes herself sound younger, which sounds like it could be weird, but it's really not. Like, it's done really well, which in my opinion just makes the story so much more impactful, because when she's telling these stories and she's like 10 years old, she sounds juvenile, and it just really makes you appreciate like how young she really was when she was going through all of this. Okay, the next one, I'm gonna be honest, the book like was not my favorite. However, I know a lot of people who did love the book, so I still want to recommend it, and that is One Italian Summer. This is about a girl who was supposed to go on a trip to Italy with her mother, but her mother sadly passes away and she decides to still go on the trip alone, and she ends up meeting the younger version of her mom who took this trip when she was like 25. So it's a little bit of like magical realism, which again, like not personally my thing really, but The audiobook is narrated by Lauren Graham, who, if you don't know, is Lorelai, the mom in Gilmore Girls, and I love Gilmore Girls, and she was the perfect person to pick for this. Like, I don't know, like maybe if you've never seen Gilmore Girls you wouldn't care, but if you have seen the show, like it's so perfect. I loved listening to her narrate this. Next is another nonfiction, The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. If you're around my age, like you probably have loved John Green and went through a John Green phase. I definitely did. I was obsessed with him. And this is a book of short essays where he just talks about like everything, like the most random things, but he's John Green, so obviously it's like written beautifully and it's like deep and thoughtful and all that. And I believe it's sort of like adapted from his podcast, which makes sense because like listening to him talk about these things, like it is like you're listening to a podcast in a good way, and I just loved listening to it. I could listen to him talk about anything for hours, so I was happy. Next is a sci-fi book called This Is How You Lose the Time War, and it's about these two like spies, I guess, on each side of the time war. One's red, one's blue, and they're enemies who end up writing letters to each other, and they strike up a relationship that way. It's sapphic. And the audiobook has two narrators, one for each character, and they go in. Like, they are so emotional and just give the story so much life. And it is kind of one of those books where you have no idea what's going on for the first like 40 pages. But once you get into it and you get what's happening, I fell in love. It's so good. The narration is so like passionate. And it's really short. I think the audiobook is only like 6 hours, but I did not want it to end. I literally felt like I was listening to real people read letters. Last, we have Ready Player One, which again, one of my favorite books of all time. Please read it even if you don't listen to the audiobook. But the audiobook is narrated by Will Wheaton. And if you don't know, this is also like a sci-fi type story where it's basically, what is it called? Virtual reality. Oh my god. It's basically virtual reality. So they can do like whatever. It's like the future, and basically everybody lives in virtual reality, and the guy that invented it passes away and leaves clues and says whoever can like solve the mystery will inherit all my fortune. And it all has to do with like the 80s, because that's the era he grew up, like 80s movies, video games, all that kind of stuff. And Will Wheaton just does such a good job of like sounding passionate about everything they're talking about, because the main character is so passionate about all of that. And I think it just makes an immersive story like even more so. And his voice just fits the character so well. That's a pet peeve of mine too with audiobooks, when the voice just like doesn't match the character, but he matches it perfectly. That was the last one, but if you have any other recommendations, please comment them, because I'm always looking for new ones to listen to. And thank you for watching.